From the station working for you, this is WRTV News at 5:30, streaming now.
Now at 5:30, a day of celebration. Why January 20th marks more than just the day to swear in the president. For one Indiana family with an incredible history to share. It's one of the hottest investment opportunities right now, but it's Bitcoin what's best for you? The big risks the experts say you need to know about before you make that move with your money. Jessica.
Topping our lineup, childcare is one industry where we could see more jobs added this year. Well, we know about the timing on that hiring and the questions you should ask if you're looking for childcare. Support groups are helping thousands of COVID long haulers feel heard, but we're looking at what new research shows about treatment. We're getting a new perspective on just how much racial bias is happening while we shop. How changes to hiring would be one way to address this.
Tonight, there is a new president of the United States. Joe Biden sworn in a little less than 6 hours ago. January 20th is a significant day on the calendar every 4 years, Inauguration Day. But as WRTV's Rafael Sanchez reports, one local family has more than one reason to celebrate January 20th as a day full of milestones.
Clarabelle Black has lived long enough to see the nation elect 18 presidents. Born in 1921, President Harding was in office. His childhood saw the rise and fall of Presidents Coolidge and Hoover. His commander-in-chief was FDR during World War II, while he served in the Aleutian Islands from June 1943 through December 1944. He was a member of the greatest generation.
Their pride in their country is still phenomenal. He loved being in the Army. He has Alzheimer's, and so a lot of things have gone, but that he remembers. And so his desire and his need to remember that part of his life has stuck with him for a long, long time. And I really admire that.
He was such a humble person, and he instilled that into all of us.
In 1946, he married Mary. Their 75-year union has outlasted the presidencies of Truman, Eisenhower, JFK, LBJ, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Trump. January the 20th was key to those men, but it's special every year for the father of 5, grandfather of 7, and great-grandfather of 13. This is Clarabelle's 100th birthday and the inauguration of a new president, Joe Biden.
Well, I think it's a celebration for both.
For both my mom and my dad, having a new president was a special thing. It was a good thing to have a new president. It was sort of a new start for the country, and it was a time to kind of celebrate.
While the nation marks a constitutional tradition, Clarabelle marks a milestone. It's a big day for him as well. Working for you, Rafael Sanchez, WRTV.
So much history he has seen. The family arranged for Clarabelle to get cards and get donuts delivered to him today, and we send along our birthday wishes as well. Kevin.
He's probably still opening the cards and eating the donuts. Not a bad day, unless you could spend it doing this. You recognize this young man?
I think he is having a great day.
I just wish you sent me a video of him dragging the bed into position and then sunning the undercarriage. So that's Leo lounging today at the Starantino house. Let's talk about the sunshine across central Indiana. We'll enjoy more of it as we go through the next several days. That's the good news. Okay, one little cloud kind of hiding for the moment the setting sun, but I think it'll add character to the sky. Temperatures range from 30 in Gary and Fort Wayne to just above freezing in Indy, and then all the way to 40 degrees down in Evansville. The wind stays strong out of the southwest. It'll actually increase this evening, but notice it won't be as cold. Temperatures will be in the upper 20s, but that's early overnight. We'll wake up to around 32 degrees tomorrow morning. Jessica.
At least 60 countries are dealing with community transmission of the COVID strain that originated in the UK. The World Health Organization says that's 10 more countries than a week ago. In the U.S., there are at least 122 cases of the UK variant. The variant seems to spread more easily, but the CDC says there is no evidence that it's more deadly or causes more severe symptoms. Today marks 1 year since the first case of coronavirus in the U.S. was reported. We have reached some grim numbers since then. The United States alone has already seen more than 400,000 COVID deaths. This comes as we see new variants of the virus and the rollout of 2 vaccines. The CDC is about to get a new director who assures that the vaccines should still work against these variants. The Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are between 94 and 95% effective. Dr. Rochelle Walensky tells JAMA that most vaccines, like the flu shot, don't have as high of an efficacy rate.
The efficacy of the vaccine is so good and so high that we have a little bit of a cushion, so that even if in the lab some of these variants don't appear as robust as the initial strain, that we'll probably still end up with quite a good vaccine.
The big things to watch for in COVID variants are how transmissible they are, how they affect mortality rates, and how well the vaccines are tackling the virus. Dr. Walensky says right now there's not enough lab infrastructure to monitor variants. However, she expects that to change as President Biden takes office.
Part of the president-elect's budget is to bolster that dramatically. And so I'm really, and the work is already being done to create those connections with industry and academia and public health labs to make sure we have a really good influx and we can follow these variants across the country.
As the vaccine rolls out to more groups, Dr. Walensky says the federal government needs to check in with each state to see what their needs are in terms of logistics. The CDC wants to make sure there are enough people out there who can vaccinate others, which may mean having to recruit retired workers, medical and nursing students, as well as military health workers. Ahead in our lineup, childcare is one industry where we could see more jobs added this year. What we know about the timing on that hiring and the questions you should ask if you're looking for childcare.
Visit GetStewart.com.
Forget Mega Millions and Powerball. Some people are getting rich this new year by buying up Bitcoins. But before you give it a try, consumer reporter John Matarese has a buyer beware message so you don't waste your money.
Have you heard of Bitcoin, the digital currency? If so, you may have heard that it recently doubled in price. But before you try to buy some, buyer beware. Bitcoin is red hot. This digital world currency ran up from $20,000 in December to $40,000 by January 10th, making big money for investors. But it then dropped 20%, burning investors who arrived late to the party. Fortune magazine says Bitcoin is a bubble that has popped several times, most recently in March 2020 when it plunged 60%. CNBC's Jim Cramer says it can be part of your investments and says he owns some. But he says only play what you can afford to lose, just like in a casino. But from the dust of that stink file, what can happen when a bubble bursts? Most younger investors may not remember the 1999 dot-com bubble, when any stock with a dot-com at the end doubled in days. It all crashed in the dot-com bust. The poster child was Pets.com, and late investors in it lost fortunes. Doesn't that stink? Bank of America calls Bitcoin the mother of all bubbles, so invest accordingly. It's not a scam, and you could make big money, but you could also lose big money too. Could Bitcoin double or triple in price again? Sure, but it could also plunge, as it has several times before, so be careful so you don't waste your money. I'm John Matarese, WRTV.
2021 will be a critical year for the child care industry after the pandemic turned it upside down. More than half of providers say they've lost money in the last year by staying open, according to a recent survey. 42% say they're taking on personal debt to pay professional costs. But some help is on the way, though everyone agrees it's just a start. The newest COVID relief package includes $10 billion for the child care industry. Plus, some providers will also be eligible for money through the Paycheck Protection Program. Despite all of that, it could be a booming year for childcare jobs as more people get vaccinated and return to work.
We expect that in the summer, there will definitely be a peak, an increase in demand for childcare because some of the camps aren't going to be open. Some of what families have utilized for childcare during those off-school times may not yet be up and running or may be constricted in size. So we expect a higher demand for in-home childcare.
Laura Davis is a franchise owner with College Nannies, Sitters, and Tutors. She helps connect families with fully vetted care providers. But for parents seeking care on their own, Davis recommends asking a lot of questions during the interview.
When parents are looking for a child care provider, they should be looking for that energy and that excitement the more you talk about the children and the more you share about what the day would be like.
She says the more specific a candidate's answer can be, the better. Also, providers with experience outside of their family and circle of close friends are preferred. Davis expects demand for in-home care providers to stay strong until parents get comfortable sending their kids back to care centers again. More in our lineup. Support groups are helping thousands of COVID long haulers feel heard, but we're looking at what new research shows about treatment.
$1 drain cleaning special.
Even with the presidential inauguration now over, deep divisions remain in the country. To some, they may seem insurmountable. Maya Rodriguez is in Washington, D.C. for today's historic events and has spoken to experts about what it might take to get different sides together and how we can all help.
This is just one example of the massive security presence here in D.C. Take a look over my shoulder. You see members of the National Guard and local law enforcement here. The inauguration and the events surrounding it are considered a national special security event. And after the insurrection at the Capitol, that security is exponentially tighter now. And if the insurrection taught us anything, it's that we have a long way to go in our national political dialogue.
The ideal about America is that it's always been about more than what divides it. Getting back to that ideal is going to take some work.
The voices of leaders matter.
Lara Schwartz heads up the project on civil discourse at American University. She says civility in the public space starts with truth.
We can have disagreements regarding policy, regarding ideology, regarding what the best thing for this country might be. But we should be agreeing on facts and respecting them.
But how to get to truth? We are the key to that, says David Wiley-Camp of the Dialogue Company, which specializes in getting opposing sides to communicate.
We can strengthen our democracy and strengthen our sense of civic connectivity, but we have to learn to talk to each other better.
He says doing that is not about sharing an opinion or trying to change someone's mind about an issue. Instead, it's about sharing your own personal experiences with someone else.
Most people who study dialogue know that a conversation about experience is more connected than a conversation about opinion. We can work back to having a culture where at events and in public spaces, there's a spirit of dialogue like we used to have.
So there needs to be some amount of accountability, but then I also think we have to be ready to accept apologies, accept retractions of this great lie, and then the healing can start.
Meanwhile, here in Washington, some of the security enhancements for the inauguration will be up at least through the end of the month. But the city's mayor says it's possible that some of those security enhancements, particularly now in place around the Capitol, might be up much longer and for the foreseeable future, calling it a new reality we will all have to get used to. In Washington, I'm Maya Rodriguez.
The sun is setting later. Here's proof. 5:51 is sunset time this evening, and good-looking sunset it is. The wind will actually increase as we go through the evening and overnight. They'll gust 30 miles per hour. That sets a stage for temperatures to be steady and then slowly rising by morning. Next 3 days, looking at dry conditions, the temperature goes way up, then comes quickly back down. We'll hold off on any precip till later Sunday. We've got basically almost a 4-day run, if you count most of Sunday. Tonight, 28 with a mostly clear sky. The 28 will happen closer to midnight. We won't climb that much, but we'll be around 30 to 31 or so in the morning. There's your 7 a.m. forecast. Back to lots of sunshine tomorrow. That doesn't disappear. What changes? The temperature all the way to 44. That will come with a west wind 15 to 25, but that is the warmest temperature within the 7-day planner. There's your wind out of the west through the day. As you look at your Friday forecast, that's how quickly we get whiplash in Indiana. 44 tomorrow, only 30 for the high on Friday. Cannot make it back to the freezing mark to end the work week. Jessica.
Dr. Anthony Fauci says a third COVID vaccine could be ready for approval in weeks. The vaccine is produced by Johnson & Johnson and uses a different type of technology from the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. The technology is called a viral vector vaccine. Scientists take genetic code from the coronavirus's spike protein and insert it into a harmless virus that acts as a transport vehicle.
It's like a spaceship. It brings the genetic code to the cell, and then the cell sees the genetic code and then all of a sudden starts making these spike proteins.
The spike proteins familiarize the immune system and generate antibodies so that the body is ready to fight off the real coronavirus. Because of this different approach, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is being tested as a one-dose shot.
It's going to be a major problem. I predict it's going to be a major problem.
Throughout the pandemic, millions have felt relief after recovering from COVID-19, but for some, it's short-lived as symptoms linger or new ones appear. Amanda Brandeis shows us how the medical community is searching for new ways to treat the growing population of COVID-19 long haulers.
I think doctors are just kind of like, I don't have any more answers.
But it's human nature.
We have members from over 80 countries.
To search for answers in times of uncertainty.
It's caught on like wildfire.
A trained nurse, Delane Bond, created a Facebook support group for nurses last March.
If the nurses go down, our whole healthcare system goes down.
People turn to the forum for support and answers.
Somebody reached out to me asking about long COVID.
Known as COVID long haulers, they report symptoms lasting weeks or months. Bond created a support group for the growing population, sharing evidence-based research.
Group members were joining. They would go into these long lists of symptoms, fatigue, the brain fog.
Now it's helping thousands feel heard.
Oh my gosh, people's teeth are starting to fall out. Why?
She'd also find answers of her own.
I've had some cardiac changes. The shingles or the rash that I got was in June.
Bond believes she had COVID in February, and the unexplained medical conditions began to make sense.
One of the major things that's really bothering patients is when they're being treated like it's all in their head.
It's very confusing and it's going to be very hard to diagnose.
Called post-viral syndrome, Dr. Ian White says it's not new.
But with COVID-19, many patients are experiencing very mild symptoms, and so that doesn't really explain how they need such a long recovery period.
A long neglected field of research, he says the pandemic is shining a light on the phenomenon.
We're going to see hundreds of thousands, if not millions of patients with long hauler symptoms that are going to need treatment.
His company, Neobiosis, is using regenerative medicine to develop one, with help from the University of Florida Innovate Center.
We use birth tissue that's discarded, so it's considered waste product, but it contains a huge number of growth factors and cells, very, very potent.
Researchers say lingering symptoms could be linked to the virus attacking our vascular system, damaging blood vessels and vital organs. Dr. White believes amniotic fluid, a liquid developed in pregnancy, could help promote tissue repair and reduce inflammation, relieving long hauler symptoms.
Utilize the body's own ability to repair and regenerate.
Clinical trials could begin this year pending FDA approval.
How do we treat those patients, because they're going to be removed from the workforce, a burden on healthcare, and they're going to be very sick for a very long time. And so we must focus on these patients.
I'm Amanda Brandeis reporting.
Finally in our lineup, we're getting a new perspective on just how much racial bias is happening while we shop. How changes to hiring would be one way to address this.
It's called Peak Performance for Men today.
Racial bias in stores continues to be a reality for Black Americans. Now some companies are starting to take action.
This is a pervasive industry-wide problem. And any company that thinks that they're immune, they will have a wake-up call eventually. So their viral moment is just waiting to happen.
Cassie Pittman-Clater's research focuses on how racism plays out in the lives of Black Americans. She was also part of a new study commissioned by Sephora looking at racial bias in the shopping experience. That study found 2 in 5 shoppers in the U.S. have personally experienced unfair treatment because of their race or skin tone. Also, Black shoppers are more likely than white shoppers to receive unfair treatment based on their skin color. Pittman-Clater says it was interesting to see in the study how often retail workers workers also experience discrimination from customers. She says while it's more likely people stocking the store shelves are people of color, retail managers tend to be majority white.
Retail managers often have a lot of discretion, right? They have discretion about when the police are called, when the customer is surveilled. They have discretion over whether or not someone can make a return without a receipt.
Sephora is making changes to address racial bias at its stores when it comes to some of its policing. It says it will cut back on third-party security officers at its stores and use more in-house specialists instead. It's also doubling the number of Black-owned brands it sells by the end of the year. Pittman-Clater says companies need to reassess who they're hiring as well.
We know, for example, simply having a diversity training is not enough. And so I think one of the ways in which companies can really take steps to reduce the problem is through having a more diverse workforce.
She says companies also need to be doing a better job of keeping data on how many customers are experiencing discrimination. The Sephora study found people often don't complain. They just leave the store. Pittman-Clater says customers can help by making sure they are documenting what is happening to them and explaining why they felt disrespected and treated unfairly. The millions of people struggling to pay rent are on pins and needles waiting to see how much help President Biden's administration offers. Tomorrow, we'll look at some options beyond extending the moratorium on evictions and how some are calling for a lessening of restrictions on aid money.
Looking ahead to the weekend, Saturday, more sunshine than the second half of the weekend, and temperatures will be cooler, 32, partly to mostly sunny Saturday. Sunday, a 30% chance for a rain-snow mix. That's all for the news at 5:30.